Let's have a play with the number 99 ScrawlrBox. In this video, we're going to dive a little deeper into using the supplies as featured in the number 99 ScrawlrBox, covering some of those tips and tricks as seen in this month's zine. Before we start, let's pick some colours. As we have an entire rainbow to choose from, let's break it down so it's a little bit less daunting. To help me pick my colour palette, I'm going to make up a little colour wheel made up of the 3 primary colours and the 3 secondaries. There are so many ways to do this, but here's just a few of the easiest ways. First option, monotone. Pick any colour, then dilute that down into its shades for a more harmonious feel. This can include black and white. The second option is analogous, and this consists of 3 or more colours next to each other in the colour wheel, and this creates a more calming colour palette. And the third option, my personal go-to, is a complementary colour palette, and this is based around 2 colours opposite each other in the colour wheel to really bring out the brightness of each colour. Alright, let's crack on. I'll be using the paper provided. You could also use the cover or the back page. Pastels really like texture. Beginning with swatching out my chosen colours in my complementary colour palette. I find this stops me getting overwhelmed and distracted. It gives me something to focus on. Too many colours makes my brain just stop, so I end up abandoning everything I'm doing. Right, I've got my colours, so it's time to get into this month's challenge. And I'll start with a light pencil base using the Faber-Castell 2B pencil as provided in this month's box. I'm aiming for a rough guide so I can add on top of it, keeping it nice and loose. If you find you've gone a bit harder than needed with the pencil, which I definitely have here, you can use the Kneadable eraser to roll over your sketch and lighten up the graphite. Remember to pop it back in its little house, that way it will keep it soft. Light layer achieved, let's go in with that bright pigment. The stroke you create depends on how you hold the pastel, so use the tip for fine lines and then the edge for thicker lines. I'm just sort of rolling it around a bit as I'm drawing with it, so I get thin lines and thick lines, really mixing it up, keeping this loose. These pastels are a lot messier than I remembered, but that's okay. If you keep a dry tissue handy, you can wipe off the excess dust as you go. For this first layer, I'm going to smooth out some of that texture. I use a soft sponge applicator to do this. It looks quite dirty, but it's not. You can wash it, but it does stain. Dabbing the pigment into the tooth of the paper keeps it nice and vivid while softening the texture. When using pastels, it's best to work in soft layers. Use the base layer to create the shapes and the flat colours, and then the next layers can be used to work in shading, and then the final layer is for adding in those details. Of course I've gone and broken it because I am heavy-handed and clumsy. Once these break, they do tend to crumble and make even more of a mess. It's okay though, it's nothing that can't be fixed, so we'll just get rid of that little bit that's crumbled on top by tapping it off gently. Try to avoid touching it as much as possible or you end up smudging it all over the paper and all over your hands. Old me would have just haphazardly swiped at this and just hoped for the best, so it's nice to see I have learnt some lessons along the way. You can use the powder and apply it to the page with your finger in a more controlled way. This will switch up for nice variation in texture. So, kind of a happy accident. I'm quite happy with how this is coming along together so far. I've not used soft pastels since school, which was a long time ago. So I got excited when I was swatching these out in the unboxing, just because look how bright they are. They're wonderful. think I've done what I can with the colours for now, so time to wash my hands and move on to the pencil layer. I'm going to add more details in with the graphite as it's easier to control, and I want that contrast with the graphite sheen against the pastel's mateness. It sits really great on top of these pastels and doesn't smudge or blend into the layer underneath. Sort of cut through that pigment nicely, so even when you've got a really thick chunk of pastel in there, the graphite just slides through it. Honestly, the feeling is so satisfying. And now I'm just going to add in more pastels until I'm happy with this. The harder you press, the less texture, the brighter the pigment. Also means more dust, so you've got to keep tapping that off. The pastel layers back over the graphite quite nicely as well. They seem so scary at first, but they really are such a joy to use. I'm going to finish off with a touch of the white pastel pencil, smooth out some of the edges and add in some pops of highlight. Oh look, messy fingerprints. But don't worry, that's also easy to banish away with the Kneadable eraser. Just dab it on and you're left with no residue. As it picks up the pigment, I sort of folded it all in together so that I got a clean bit of the eraser to go back over the next bit with. Otherwise I found it did move the pigment around the page a bit. Now it's time to clean up this pretty mess. Swipe with a dry tissue, wipe with soapy water, and then dry. And there we have it, the supplies in action from the number 99 ScrawlrBox. What did you think of these pastels? From looking at socials, it really seems that you either love them or you hate them. But I've got to say, I thought I was going to hate them, but I really enjoyed them. They're so bright and easy to use. Let us know in the comments below. And until next time, keep scrolling.